You probably know Maureen McCormick for her role as the picture-perfect Marcia Brady on the show The Brady Bunch. But most people never realized that behind the flawless smile and golden curls was a girl holding onto a secret that involved an unexpected bond with the king of pop himself. What really happened between Maureen McCormick and Michael Jackson? Why has their relationship remained one of Hollywood's quietest love stories? And how did two of the most famous kids in America find something so personal in a world built on performance? Their love story is so complicated and has been buried beneath decades of silence, until now. Maureen McCormick's rise to fame. When people think of Maureen McCormick, they often remember the sunshine smile, the iconic blonde hair, and that ever-so-perfect Marcia Brady voice. But what they don't know is that behind the curtain of her fame lies a quiet, almost secret story involving a relationship with Michael Jackson. And while the world still debates what that relationship truly was, Maureen has admitted that the relationship deeply impacted her. But to understand why her bond with Michael mattered so much, not just to fans but to her personally, it's important to understand where it all began. Long before she stepped into the Brady family living room, Maureen McCormick was just a little girl from California who was unknowingly being groomed by fate for a life that would be anything but ordinary. Born on August 5, 1956, in Encino, a quiet neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley, Maureen Denise McCormick was the youngest of 4 children in a working-class Catholic family. Her father, Richard, was a teacher, and her mother, Irene, stayed home to raise the children. By the time she turned 6, it was already clear that Maureen had something special. That year, she won the Baby Miss San Fernando Valley Beauty Pageant, a tiny crown that would soon open big doors. Not long after, she landed roles in national television commercials, most notably as the voice of Chatty Cathy, the talking doll that became a 1960s craze. For thousands of American kids, that voice was their best friend. But for Maureen, it was just the beginning. By the late 1960s, she had already begun appearing on popular shows like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. And although they were small parts, they were meaningful ones. Hollywood took notice of her expressive face, her natural delivery, and her ability to memorize lines with ease. She wasn't just another cute kid on the block. She was sharp, ambitious, and able to shift from adorable to sincere in a heartbeat. But everything changed in 1969 when Maureen auditioned for a new TV sitcom that was still in its early development phase. It was about a large blended family of 3 boys, 3 girls, a widowed father, and a widowed mother who find love and combine households. The show was called The Brady Bunch, and producers were searching for someone who could embody the role of the oldest daughter, a girl who was smart, graceful, well-behaved, and, in their words, the kind of teenager every parent would be proud of. Maureen nailed the audition, and at just 13 years old, she officially became Marcia Brady, a character that would follow her for the rest of her life. The Brady Bunch debuted on ABC on September 26, 1969, and although it wasn't an immediate ratings smash, over time, it grew into a phenomenon. It offered something new, a wholesome, upbeat portrayal of blended families, showing unity, humor, and affection in an era when divorce and remarriage were still somewhat taboo on television. As Marcia Brady, Maureen McCormick became America's golden girl. She wasn't just the oldest Brady sibling. She was the teenage icon of the early 1970s. From her perfectly flipped hair to her sunny disposition, girls wanted to be her, and boys had posters of her taped to their bedroom walls. But what made Maureen's portrayal so powerful was how natural it seemed. However, behind the scenes, things were not as smooth as they looked on television, and Maureen was struggling to keep up with the image the world had forced onto her. Off-screen, she was a typical teen with insecurities, doubts, and fears. But on screen, she had to be the picture of perfection. And this was something she never fully reconciled. Professionally, she was on fire. Her popularity soared. She was featured in teen magazines, landed endorsement deals, and even released music with co-star Christopher Knight. Overnight, she'd become more than just an actress. She was now a brand. And as reruns of The Brady Bunch cemented its legacy, Maureen's fame refused to fade. Even after the original show ended in 1974, her relationship with the Brady name continued. She reprised her role in several spin-offs that sadly never reached the same cultural peak as the original. However, they kept the characters alive in the public's imagination. And through it all, one thing remained constant: the fact that Maureen was still Marcia in the public's eye. But what the cameras never showed was the cost of all that perfection. While the world praised her for her beauty, her charm, and her seemingly flawless life, Maureen was hiding a darker reality, one marked by anxiety, family troubles, and eventually, substance abuse. The pressure to live up to the Marcia Brady image wasn't just exhausting, it was destructive. And during this deeply vulnerable time, amid the whirlwind of fame and the chaos of growing under a microscope, Maureen met a boy who would quietly shift the way she saw the world. Maureen's personal battles and struggles. For millions of fans, Maureen McCormick was the very image of youth, beauty, and happiness. On screen, she was Marcia Brady, the golden girl who always had the right answer, the perfect hair, and the perfect life. But off-screen, Maureen was quietly falling apart, and the gap between who she had to be for the cameras and who she really was in private only grew wider with time. Being a child star came with more pressure than most people realized. From a young age, Maureen felt like she had to smile even when she didn't want to, perform when she was tired, and look perfect even when she felt broken inside. She was constantly told to maintain the wholesome image that made her famous, and every magazine cover, interview, and public appearance became a test to determine if she could live up to the fantasy of Marcia Brady. But the truth was, Maureen didn't always feel perfect. In fact, she often didn't even feel okay. At some point, she struggled with anxiety, self-doubt, and confusion. Things were even more complicated at home, because Maureen's childhood, while full of opportunity, also came with real pain. Her family had a history of mental illness, and that shadow affected her deeply. She later revealed that she was born with congenital syphilis, which had been passed to her from her mother. And while she recovered physically, the psychological toll was heavy. From a young age, she became obsessed with her health, often fearing the worst and carrying a constant sense of dread that something inside her was broken. But that wasn't all, because as soon as The Brady Bunch wrapped in 1974, Maureen suddenly found herself without structure. The show that had defined her for 5 years was over. The spotlight dimmed. The phone didn't ring as often, and the emptiness left behind was hard to fill. And so, she began to spiral. Her struggles with mental health grew worse, and soon they were joined by something even more dangerous: substance addiction. At first, it seemed harmless, a little partying here and a little escape there. But it didn't take long for it to get out of hand. She began missing auditions and sabotaging opportunities. At one point, she was supposed to meet with director Steven Spielberg, a career-defining chance. But she missed that opportunity when she showed up to the audition under the influence of illicit substances. As the years passed, her addiction grew stronger. So did the darkness that came with it. She battled several health issues, deep sadness, and a constant feeling of being lost. There were moments when she hit rock bottom, and she admits that, in her most desperate times, she made dangerous choices just to feed her habit. She was no longer the bubbly teenager America had once adored. She was someone else entirely, who was tired, scared, and falling apart. And yet, even in those moments, Maureen never completely gave up. Somewhere inside her was still the will to fight. That fight became more real when she met a man named Michael Cummings. He wasn't part of Hollywood, nor did he care about fame. He saw Maureen not as a former TV star, but as a person in pain. Their connection was honest and raw. And when he saw how bad things had become, he gave her an ultimatum to quit her terrible habits. And that was the moment everything changed. For Maureen, that was the wake-up call she needed. She checked into rehab. She began therapy. And for the first time in a long time, she started telling the truth to herself, to others, and to the world. It wasn't easy, but she stuck with it. And slowly, she learned how to live again, how to trust herself, and how to build a life that didn't revolve around fame or fear. Her healing didn't just stay private. In 2008, she shared her story with the world in her memoir, Here's the Story: Surviving Marcia Brady and Finding My True Voice. The book became a bestseller, not because it was glamorous or dramatic, but because it was honest. For the first time, Maureen laid everything bare: the pain, the mistakes, the recovery, and in doing so, she helped others feel seen too. Today, Maureen McCormick has been sober for over 4 decades. But before all of that healing could begin, there was a strange and unexpected moment that offered Maureen a brief sense of calm in the middle of her storm. It was a friendship that seemed unlikely to outsiders, but made perfect sense to her. A connection with someone who understood the pressures of growing up in front of the world, who also felt trapped by fame, and who had his own quiet battles behind the spotlight. His name was Michael Jackson. And while the world still debates whether they were simply close friends or something more, it's clear that the bond they shared impacted both of them deeply. But what really happened between them? Relationship timeline with Michael Jackson. Looking back now, it almost feels surreal. 2 of the most famous teenagers in America quietly slipping into each other's lives, not through the lens of fame, but through a quiet understanding of what it meant to be lonely while adored by millions. In the early 1970s, Maureen McCormick and Michael Jackson shared a connection that was simple, gentle, and, for a brief moment, something that felt like young love. It all started when the Jackson 5 visited the set of The Brady Bunch. At the time, both acts were at the peak of their early fame. The Brady family was a weekly staple in American living rooms, and the Jackson 5 had become a global sensation. It was a media-friendly visit on the surface, but behind the scenes, something genuine sparked between Maureen and Michael. They were just kids. Maureen was around the age of 16, while Michael, who was 2 years younger, was around 14. But they immediately recognized something familiar in each other. They both had grown up in front of the cameras. They both had to smile when they didn't feel like it, and both had to carry an image far bigger than themselves. While the world only saw the headlines and the lights, what Maureen and Michael found in each other was comfort. In the chaos of fame, their bond was a quiet escape. They began spending time together, going roller skating in Woodland Hills, visiting each other's homes, and talking about things they couldn't always share with others. There were no screaming fans in those moments, no bodyguards hovering over them, and no industry demands. Just 2 teenagers trying to figure themselves out in a world that rarely gave them space to be normal. Years later, Maureen confirmed what had long been whispered. On "I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here," she told her fellow contestants that she and Michael were actually boyfriend and girlfriend. But she quickly added that it wasn't anything dramatic or intense. It was cute and innocent, and they were just 2 kids who liked each other. She revealed that they would hold hands, giggle, and occasionally sneak a quick kiss on the cheek. She said, "I used to hang out in their house and hang out with Michael. We held hands and kissed on the cheeks, never on the lips." This statement proved that in their relationship, there was no physical intensity, scandal, or hidden agendas. It was just a friendship with a soft romantic edge, built more on mutual comfort than passion. And for Maureen, who had always struggled to separate herself from the role of Marcia Brady, Michael saw her differently. He didn't talk to her like she was a character. He talked to her like a real person, and that meant more to her than most people ever knew. Although they never made any public appearances as a couple through red carpet sightings or interviews, it was clear that their relationship was theirs alone and protected from the spotlight. That privacy helped keep it pure, but it also meant that when it ended, there was no headline or big goodbye. Their romance didn't crash or end on bad terms, it just slowly faded. As their lives moved in different directions, so did they. Michael was pulled deeper into the world of music and touring, while Maureen was left to grapple with the pressures of post-Brady life and deal with the personal demons that were beginning to take over. There never was a dramatic breakup or final phone call. Instead, they quietly went their separate ways. Still, that chapter in her life stayed with her. In later interviews, Maureen often spoke of Michael with a quiet affection. She never exaggerated what they had, but she also never dismissed it. What they shared was probably not a great love story by Hollywood standards, but to Maureen, it really mattered. Because at a time when she felt trapped by fame and unsure of her identity, Michael was someone who made her feel understood, because he had been through it too. Decades later, as the world watched Michael Jackson's life unfold in front of cameras, tabloids, and courtrooms, Maureen stayed mostly silent. She didn't rush to insert herself into the conversation or seek attention from their history. But when she did speak, her words were always kind. And maybe that's what makes their love story so striking. For a short while, they found comfort in each other. And sometimes, that kind of quiet connection leaves the deepest mark. But while Maureen eventually found peace, Michael's journey took a much darker turn. As the years passed, the pressure that had always surrounded him only intensified. The boy who once roller skated through Woodland Hills with a teen star would become one of the most iconic and most scrutinized figures in the world. His later life was filled with unimaginable highs and devastating lows, and eventually, a heartbreaking tragedy. The quiet end of a global icon. As Michael Jackson grew older, the gentle and soft-spoken boy Maureen McCormick once knew was still there somewhere. But over time, he became harder to recognize beneath the pressure, the expectations, and the endless scrutiny that came with being one of the most famous people in the world. Michael didn't just become a star, he became a global phenomenon. With albums like Thriller, Bad and Dangerous, he redefined pop music and created a sound and image that would influence generations. Thriller alone became the best-selling album of all time. His music videos weren't just promotional tools, they were cinematic events, filled with choreography, storytelling, and groundbreaking effects. His moonwalk became one of the most iconic dance moves in history. And behind the performances, there was also a deep commitment to humanitarian causes. He donated millions to charities, used his platform to promote messages of unity, and tried to build a legacy that went beyond entertainment. But with every career high came another kind of weight. In 1993, Michael's world began to unravel in public. He was accused of inappropriate behavior, and this sent shockwaves through the media and shattered the image many had of the once untouchable pop star. Though the case was settled out of court and Michael maintained his innocence, the damage was already done. Years later, he faced another trial, this time a criminal one. The case dragged on for months, and although he was ultimately acquitted of all charges, the constant attention and speculation left scars that never truly healed. Even after the trial ended, the whispers never stopped. He became a target for paparazzi and tabloid headlines. Every appearance, every change in his appearance, and every rumor was dissected in real time. Michael became more reclusive and more anxious, and he began to struggle with the growing sense that he could never truly escape the spotlight, even when he wasn't looking for it. Behind closed doors, he was battling insomnia that had reached dangerous levels. He reportedly went days without sleeping and was desperate for relief. That desperation led him down a dangerous path, and under the care of his personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, Michael began receiving nightly doses of a powerful surgical anesthetic that should never be used outside a hospital. It was a risky and deeply unsafe decision. But by that point, Michael was exhausted. He was preparing for a massive comeback tour, a series of shows meant to restore his legacy and remind the world why he was still the king of pop. But he never made it to opening night. On June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson was found unresponsive in his Los Angeles home. He had gone into cardiac arrest after an overdose, and attempts to revive him failed. Michael's death shocked the world. Fans gathered across continents. Vigils were held. Tributes poured in. And the music industry stood still for a moment, mourning the loss of someone who had shaped so much of modern culture. His passing was declared a homicide, and Dr. Murray was eventually convicted of involuntary manslaughter. But no legal outcome could bring closure for his devastating passing. For many, Michael's final years felt like a tragic unraveling of a life that had once brought so much joy. But for those who had known him personally, the loss felt deeply personal. Maureen McCormick, who had shared a short and innocent chapter with Michael in their youth, later reflected on how difficult it was to watch his later life play out in such a painful and public way. She remembered the boy who had made her feel safe, who had held her hand during a confusing time, and who had shown her kindness without ever asking for anything in return. And when the news of his death broke, it wasn't the pop star that came to her mind. It was the friend she once roller skated with, the friend who, like her, had tried to survive the impossible expectations of childhood fame. Michael was gone, but the quiet bond they shared, which had been built on understanding rather than fame, was something Maureen would always carry with her. In the years that followed, as she continued her own journey of healing and stability, Maureen rarely spoke in depth about Michael, but when she did, it was always with softness, not regret. Still, life moved forward, and after all the heartbreak, all the healing, and all the chapters that came before, Maureen McCormick eventually found a kind of love that lasted in the man who stood by her side through it all. The man who saved Maureen McCormick. After years of struggling in silence, losing herself to addiction, and watching opportunities pass her by, Maureen McCormick reached a point where something had to change. She knew she couldn't go on the way she had been living. The chaos, the shame, and the lies was all catching up to her. But even at her lowest, she still held on to the hope that healing was possible. And when she met Michael Cummings, something finally shifted. It was the early 1980s, and Maureen had just begun her recovery journey. She was raw, vulnerable, and still unsure if she could ever truly find peace. At that point, she wasn't looking for love or companionship. Instead, she was just trying to survive, one day at a time. But one evening, at a church concert, she crossed paths with someone who would change the course of her life. Michael Cummings wasn't part of Hollywood. He wasn't dazzled by fame, and he saw Maureen for who she truly was, instead of her role as Marcia Brady. He recognized that she was a person worthy of love, even in her brokenness. And that's what Maureen needed most, someone who didn't want to rescue her with headlines or career comebacks, but someone who could sit with her in the quiet, painful parts of her story and not walk away. Their connection grew slowly but deeply. And in Michael, Maureen found something she hadn't known in years: stability. He became her anchor during her darkest days, a steady presence when everything else felt fragile. She once said of him, "He really, really saved me from rock bottom." And that wasn't an exaggeration. Michael gave her something no therapist or treatment program ever could, and that was unconditional love paired with tough honesty. They tied the knot in 1985. For Maureen, it was more than just a wedding. It was a turning point. With Michael by her side, she began to rebuild everything that addiction had tried to destroy. She got sober and she stayed sober. Together, they started a new chapter, built on faith, resilience, and family. Not long after their wedding, Maureen gave birth to their daughter, Natalie. Becoming a mother added a whole new layer to her healing. She wanted to give Natalie the stability she had never felt growing up. She wanted to be present, to be healthy, and to give her child the kind of love that didn't come with conditions or public expectations. And she did. For all her missteps in the past, Maureen was determined not to let them define her future. Over time, she slowly returned to the public eye, not as a struggling former child star, but as a woman who had done the hard work of rebuilding her life from the ground up. And instead of hiding her past, she began to speak openly about it. In doing so, she helped others feel less alone. In 2007, she appeared on Celebrity Fit Club, not just to improve her health, but to show that change was possible at any age. A few years later, she surprised audiences again by joining Dancing with the Stars, where she competed with grace and humility, winning over fans who remembered her not just as Marcia, but as a survivor. And on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, she opened up about moments from her youth, including her relationship with Michael Jackson, showing that she wasn't afraid of her own truth. But her comeback wasn't just about television. Maureen also found new purpose in using her platform for good. She became a passionate advocate for mental health awareness and addiction recovery, speaking to others about the importance of getting help, telling the truth, and never giving up, no matter how far gone things might seem. She also became a proud ambassador for the Special Olympics, lending her voice and time to a cause that has always been close to her heart. In 2021, she returned to television in a fresh new role, co-hosting Frozen in Time, where she helped families renovate homes stuck in outdated decades. It was lighthearted, fun, and full of color. But even in those episodes, viewers could see the joy of someone who had finally made peace with herself. At 68, Maureen McCormick's legacy is no longer just tied to the Brady Bunch, although that will always be a part of her. Today, her story is about strength, about healing, and about love that shows up when everything else falls apart. And now, she's a living example of what it means to survive fame, face your demons, and come out the other side stronger. But even with everything she's accomplished, from sobriety to motherhood, advocacy, and a second career in TV, there are moments when the past still calls her back. And sometimes, that call comes in the form of memories, of the people she met along the way, of those who are no longer here, and of one boy in particular whose life touched hers in a quiet, unforgettable way. Though their time together was brief, the connection between Maureen McCormick and Michael Jackson reflects the quiet complexity of growing up in the spotlight, where even the softest moments are shaped by pressure, expectation, and longing for normalcy in an extraordinary world. Do you think Michael Jackson and Maureen McCormick were a perfect match? Drop your answers in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.